Hello and welcome to another episode of Things That Spark Joy. Or I suppose another way of thinking about this is my favourite things. So today I want to talk a little bit about these two books and why I just love them. So sometime in the the late 90s into the 2000s, I got a bit involved with, I suppose you would call like web applications development, web development. And it was really just as an adjunct to my business that I was doing. I was self-employed at the time, and I was mainly doing computer troubleshooting and training, and also teaching at a local college, and also doing IT training through a consulting company. And at that time, I got a number of clients that asked me about websites and web development generally, and I would do the occasional website. So I got interested in design. I'd also did a lot of what I call prototyping. So what I would often do is say, well, I can't design the website for you, but we can mock up a prototype which you can then give to the web development company whoever they might use, and that way it's a better way of expressing how you want it, because some of them wanted this particular layouts, and those were fairly easy to mock up. In the process of doing that, I just got really interested in design generally. So I think as a result of me reading various books on web development, web design, I discovered these. So this is a fascinating book called The Design of Everyday Things. And if you want a really interesting read about design generally, I think this is a great book, because it just goes through some very broad concepts connected with design, and has some interesting, I suppose you could call them, case studies, examples of products, or even things like things that I never really thought about, like doors. There's a whole thing where they talk about handles on doors, and this idea of the way in which these push or pull handles, or lack of them, are designed to indicate whether you should pull the door or push it, as to whether they're flat on the surface or whether they're raised up like this. Now clearly these have got pull on them, but there's a whole discussion about whether you could just do away with the signage, and the design of the object, the artifact, is such that it instinctively makes you think, oh, I need to do this with it. So there's areas that are covered quite a bit in the book, I think, about the actual physicality of design, and how designing things in certain ways in some ways does away with the need for things like manuals or even labels. And as a result of reading this book, it's also, I suppose, something else it forced me to rekindle, and I won't bring the book on, is the whole issue of signs and symbols. I've actually got a really interesting book on signs and symbols, which I'll probably go through in a separate episode at some point, because I have a bit of a fascination with symbology. But yeah, so if you haven't read this book and you're interested in a broad overview of design, particularly obviously the design of everyday things, then check it out. Then off the back of that, I started to get a lot really interested in like design usability. I had done a little bit of manufacturing design when I did my computing and manufacturing postgrad under the banner of quality control, but I hadn't really fully looked into the whole thing about usability. And what happened was, of course, when I read this book, I started asking questions, musing about things in my mind about the whole idea of physical design, particularly. And this book is super interesting. So there's a couple of pages on each concept, and it goes through different concepts in design, some of which are pretty broad, but they say why it's got connections. So they've got things like the 80-20 rule. So this goes a little bit deeper into the sort of nuts and bolts of certain concepts in design that are constantly revisited in here. So it covers things like archetypes. This is a really interesting section, actually, about how you might design something where in the future people stumbling across it had lost all concept of what something might mean. So designing, I think they were talking here, were they talking about nuclear waste, something like that? Yeah, hazardous areas where maybe the hazard sign or the danger sign had gone. How could you structurally do that so that it would look like a sort of area that you don't want to visit? So there's that fascinated me. But it's all about different things, about bias and cognitive dissonance and colour. Yeah, it just goes through alphabetical order. Lovely book. I think this one, I mean, obviously these are available as ebooks. I think this is one of the ones where you just need the physical book, because I think I picked up an ebook copy of this fairly cheap, and I don't know if it flows particularly well on an e-reader. Particularly like I've got apps that will work with Amazon, but I do have an old-fashioned, one of the original Amazon readers, which is still going strong. It's probably one of the longest lasting pieces of tech I've owned, and I don't think that this looks particularly good in there, obviously. Well, partially because of the colours, but also just the diagrams, structural forms, symmetry. Yeah, great book. Yeah, so really things that spark joy, stroke things that make me happy would be, for this week, these two books here, The Design of Everyday Things and Universal Principles of Design, are two of my favourite things amongst many. Thanks once again for watching. Bye for now, and I will catch you in the next video.